Today is Monday, October 30th. We'll update you on the situation in the Middle East now that Israel has started its ground war in Gaza. Also, there seems to be a string of red flags leading up to last week's mass shooting in Maine. We'll tell you what police are now saying about the gunman, and which big-name Republican dropped out of the presidential race. Plus, what's next for striking auto workers now that another deal has been reached. How a Friends star who died suddenly over the weekend has said he'd like to be remembered. And which movie saw unexpected success as moviegoers get into the Halloween spirit. Those stories and more news to know next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Israeli forces have now entered the Gaza Strip, beginning what Israel's leader calls the second stage of war. The goal is to completely destroy the Hamas militant group, partly in retribution for its October 7th terror attack in Israel, and also to prevent any more like it. The Israeli military says it made the decision to begin a ground invasion when talks of a possible hostage release reached a stalemate. But Israel says it hasn't given up on rescuing the more than 220 hostages taken by Hamas. The Israeli military also intensified airstrikes in Gaza yesterday, including near its largest hospital. The second largest hospital has also suffered extensive damage, along with entire neighborhoods of homes, schools, mosques, and refugee camps. No one, including hundreds of Palestinian Americans, has been allowed to leave Gaza, despite efforts by foreign governments to get their citizens out. And with all of this, the humanitarian crisis just keeps getting worse for the more than 2 million people who live there. Supplies of fuel, food, and water are running out. And now the United Nations says the very fabric of society is starting to break down. Just over 80 trucks have brought supplies into Gaza since the conflict first broke out, which the UN says is just a fraction of what's needed. Now, Israel says aid deliveries will expand in Gaza's south this week, and the hope is that will keep the death toll from growing further. The health ministry in Gaza says 8,000 Palestinians have died so far, mostly women and children. Israeli officials and President Biden have questioned the reliability of those numbers, though, since the health ministry is controlled by Hamas. But the UN says the death toll could actually be even higher, and there are still fears the conflict could grow even further. Yesterday, Iran's president says Israel's actions, quote, may force everyone to take action. Already, there has been ongoing crossfire between Israel and Lebanon and Syria. The UN Security Council will hold another emergency meeting today. By the way, there has also been growing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia around the world. In just one of the latest incidents, a large mob stormed a Russian airport looking for people arriving from Tel Aviv. Even here in the U.S., there have reportedly been a slew of hate-inspired incidents because of what's happening in the Middle East. The manhunt in Maine for the suspect in last week's deadly shooting rampage has ended. Authorities say they found the man's body inside a semi-trailer at a recycling center not far from where the killings happened. He apparently died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This investigation is still going on, and many are wondering if the shooting could have been prevented. For example, law enforcement officials told the AP that police across Maine were alerted just last month to be on the lookout for the suspect, since he had made threats against an army base and soldiers. But after stepped-up patrols of the base for about 2 weeks, a local police chief says they moved on. Also, back in July, during an Army Reserve training exercise near West Point, the suspect acted erratically, heard voices, and threatened to shoot up a military base. So he was committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks. But the FBI says the man wasn't on its radar, so he wouldn't have been flagged on its instant background check system. And the guns he apparently used in last week's mass shooting were bought legally. Police in Maine do have the ability to petition a judge to take someone's guns away if a medical practitioner says they're a threat. But local police never did, saying they get many alerts like this, and there was nothing out of the ordinary about the warnings with this suspect in particular. They also pointed out that the vast majority of people with a mental health diagnosis will never hurt anybody. Still, some legal experts say someone dropped the ball in this case, leading to the deaths of 18 innocent people. Hundreds of people showed up to vigils over the weekend to honor those who died. Most of the guns made in America for civilians will have to stay in America, at least for the next few months. The Commerce Department is pausing exports of most U.S.-made firearms for 90 days. And it's reviewing its support of the country's biggest gun trade show that attracted more than 3,200 international buyers just this year. 2 steps that Bloomberg says could slow 2 decades of growth for gun sales abroad. The freeze does not apply to Israel, Ukraine, and other countries that have a separate export agreement for firearms. but it does cover some of the biggest markets for American gun makers, like Brazil, Thailand, and Guatemala. The Commerce Department says it wants to look into the risk of American guns being diverted to anyone or anything that might violate human rights or fuel criminal activities. Former Vice President Mike Pence became the first major presidential candidate to drop out of the 2024 race. He made the announcement over the weekend, which was unexpected since just last week he said he was working to qualify for the next debate stage. Pence did struggle to gain traction in a crowded Republican field, never rising above single digits in the polls. But he says he has no regrets about giving it a go. Now analysts say they expect even more Republican candidates to drop out in the months before the Iowa caucuses in January. A closely watched Iowa poll is expected to come out this morning. Much more news still ahead. But first, I'm excited to tell you about our new sponsor, Uncommon Goods. If you want to be that person who gives all your people a thoughtful and unique gift this holiday season, but without added stress, I have your secret weapon, Uncommon Goods. And even before Uncommon Goods became a sponsor, they were my go-to place to browse and buy when I did not already have a gift idea for someone. Uncommon Goods scours the globe for the most remarkable and truly unique gifts for everyone on your list. Whether your person is a coffee, wine, or book lover, a gardener or chef, a hiker, traveler, entertainer, or homebody, there is truly something for everyone and at gift-friendly price points, too. It's such an easy way to support artists and small independent businesses as well, which I love. My most recent purchase on Uncommon Goods is this beautiful, but also kind of fun and silly stoneware popcorn bowl with a kernel sifter to ensure that the next movie night is both stylish and toothache-free. How great of a gift is that for anyone who loves curling up on the couch with popcorn and a show? To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/newsworthy. That's uncommongoods.com/newsworthy to get 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. Okay, now back to the news. A fighter jet and helicopter had to scramble to divert a plane that was flying a little too close to President Biden's home in Delaware. The North American Aerospace Defense Command responded to reports of a civilian aircraft since it was over airspace that's restricted when Biden is in his home state, as he was over the weekend. NORAD says it fired flares to draw the pilot's attention and then escorted the aircraft to a nearby airport. Everyone landed safely. It's not clear if the pilot knew they were so close to the Biden home. Friends, fans, and celebrities are saying goodbye to an actor behind one of television's most loved characters. Matthew Perry, who's best known for playing Chandler Bing on Friends, died at 54 years old. Several news outlets say he was found unresponsive in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home. Investigators say the official cause of death will not be available for a while, but they say he likely drowned and that they didn't see any signs of foul play. Perry has been open about his long and public struggle with addiction. But at this point, it's not clear if his death had anything to do with alcohol or drugs. The creators of Friends wrote a tribute to Perry with a sad take on the show's famous episode titles, saying, quote, "This truly is the one where our hearts are broken." Perry also had several movie roles starring in Fools Rush In, The Whole Nine Yards, and more. Several of his big-name co-stars have posted memories of him since news of his death. And fans have created a makeshift memorial outside the New York City apartment building that was used for the exterior shots on Friends. When asked over the last couple of years how he'd like to be remembered one day, Perry mentioned his work to help others with addiction and as someone who lived and loved well. United Auto Workers made another big breakthrough after 6 weeks of strikes. The union reached a tentative deal with Stellantis that's based off a similar one made with Ford last week. It includes wage increases of 25% throughout the life of the 4.5-year contract and a $5,000 bonus. Thousands of supplemental employees will also be made permanent, and an assembly plant in Illinois that Stellantis closed last year will reopen. The deal still has to be approved by union members, but already workers are able to leave the picket lines and get back to work. There had been some hopes the UAW would also reach a similar deal with General Motors, but over the weekend, the union instead expanded the strike to another GM assembly plant. To be continued. In another big setback for General Motors, the automaker is now putting the brakes on its driverless cars nationwide. GM made the move after California revoked Cruise's permits, saying the vehicles are not safe. Specifically, the state's DMV said Cruise misrepresented some of its safety information when it was given permits to drive around customers. San Francisco was its biggest market. But Cruise was also offering rides in driverless cars in Houston, Dallas, and Austin, Texas, as well as Phoenix and Miami. For now, the company is continuing with autonomous vehicle rides, but with a human driver behind the wheel, ready to take control in case of an emergency. GM still says the technology is safer than a human driver, but Cruise says it's going to earn back public trust by being extra vigilant. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is also investigating. A horror movie based on a 9-year-old video game is now a surprise box office hit. Five Nights at Freddy's became the third biggest horror opening of all time, just behind the two It movies. It also became the best showing ever for Halloween weekend. Five Nights at Freddy's brought in about $131 million internationally, and that was surprising for a few reasons. One, because it had a modest $25 million production budget. Two, because the movie debuted simultaneously in theaters and on streaming service Peacock. And three, because most critics bashed it. Audience ratings are pretty high, though, much higher than most horror movies. That's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, support for today's episode comes from AG1. So the reason I've moved away from a daily multivitamin is because I'm now drinking AG1 every day. And AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that can replace your multivitamin and probiotic and really support whole body health. AG1 makes me feel like I'm ready to take on the day, that I've done something good for my body first thing in the morning. I drink it before I eat anything. And I've noticed a nice boost in energy too. I also appreciate that it's easy to put my AG1 into a to-go cup and take it with me, whether that's around the house, on a walk, or in the car. And that it's just one simple drinkable habit. One scoop of AG1 mixed with water, that's it. Anything that helps me save time and makes me feel good? Yes, please. If you're looking for a simpler, effective investment for your health, try AG1 and get 5 free AG1 travel packs and a free 1-year supply of vitamin D with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/newsworthy. That's drinkag1.com/newsworthy. Check it out. Now back to Money Monday. The IRS says Americans did not pay an estimated $688 billion in taxes on their 2021 returns. That's the largest shortfall ever. The IRS says most of the problem comes from people underreporting their income. But there are also people who did not file returns at all when they should have, or just never paid their bills. So now the IRS says audits and other enforcement will be stepped up to close the gap. Remember, this is a hot-button issue in Washington. The Biden administration has been pushing for the IRS to get more aggressive, saying the wealthy are not paying their share. But Republicans have fought that, worried that an overzealous IRS could intrude on even law-abiding taxpayers. Either way, it's worth noting, most people do pay their taxes on time and in full. Specifically, the IRS says about 81% of individual income tax filers and more than 85% of corporate tax filers get it right. All right, thank you so much for listening today and every day. And in case you missed it, we are offering a free download that outlines 7 ways to check if news is biased or false. Check it out by going to thenewsworthy.com/media literacy. As always, we'll be back with more news to know tomorrow. For now, have a great day.